Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the trick ball python. Essentially what the trick does is it really tricks out the patterns in the ball pythons, really jumbles up the pattern, and the kind of the challenge of the trick is if you look at the standalone trick just by itself, it's not really that impressive. It's a really subtle mutation, and really the potential of the trick is when you start mixing it in with other pattern enhancing genes, similar to something like the Pastel or the Leopard or the DJI. It works really well with the Pinstripe. You mix any of those genes with a trick and you get some really amazing combinations where the pattern is really tricked out. So today I want to jump over to the internet and now I want to show you the amazing potential of the trick ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with just the trick ball python by itself. This is what one version of the trick looks like, and in this case it looks almost like a normal ball python. As a matter of fact, if you saw this in someone's display case, you might be tempted to walk by because you really don't know the potential of what the trick can really do just looking at it as a standalone morph. And if you actually look really close, you can definitely pick out a trick from a normal. It has a really kind of a jumbled up pattern on the side, really reduced pattern instead of the regular like a Roswell gray alien head. And a lot of times on the patterns on the side you have these little, it's almost like a pixelation, these little black spots all in the patterns on the sides of the snake. And you also have, a lot of times you actually have like little antlers coming up from some of these. Almost looks like someone like blew the top off and it came back down and formed these little antlers, which is kind of an interesting effect with the trick. And this is one version of the trick. Take a look at this one. This one is completely different compared to that last one. This one is super bright yellow. This one is a trick. It's also 100% het hypo or orange ghost. If you actually have one copy of the ghost, sometimes it'll actually brighten the snake, but usually nothing like this. This is super bright. And it's kind of interesting. I've seen some people saying, hey, I actually am working with the trick, and in all my combinations, it actually darkens the background like a dark morph, which I haven't really seen it consistent across all tricks. It seems like it's kind of unique to certain lines of the trick. You can definitely see on this one it has like a super jet black background, and you can definitely tell on this one it really kind of reduces the pattern, kind of jumbles it up. You almost get these like frog eye alien heads in this case. Kind of an interesting effect that you see on the side. And here's one more example of the trick I want to show you. Take a look at this one. This one is not yellow and it doesn't have the inkjet black background that you saw in the last one. This is another one, just a straight trick, and this one's almost hard to tell because, you know, it kind of reduces the pattern a little bit, but you don't get as much pixelation in as you'd see in some of the other tricks, so it can be really variable, and sometimes it really takes a keen eye to pick out the trick compared to some of the other genes. So I thought this was kind of an interesting anomaly. I actually was just looking through all the tricks over here, and someone actually showed the belly of a trick, and I've never heard other people say that, you know, the trick belly is different than everything else. And this one almost looks like the belly of like a Confusion or a Static or an Acid or something like that. Some of those really new, some of the new genes that are really high end kind of have a jumbled up belly like this. And I'm not sure if this is, you know, kind of with all the tricks that kind of have this jumbled up belly. I just thought it was kind of interesting. If you're actually looking at the prices on these, you know, if you're actually looking at a Confusion, you're looking at about $1,500, and a trick is not that expensive. This one actually sold for $125 in 2018, so it's a pretty reasonable project to actually get into. So I want to show you some of these other genes that we can work trick into that have some really dramatic effects, working this into some other genes. And the first one I want to start with is the Pinstripe, which is my favorite gene. I think the Pinstripe is really underrated. It's a super bright gold snake, and it's really relatively inexpensive. You know, it's kind of like a step up from a normal. It's been around since the very beginning, so there's a lot of them out there, and the prices are really reasonable, and there's no genetic defects with the Pinstripe. It is a really amazing snake. And here's what happens if you work Pinstripe into a trick. Take a look at this. This is a really amazing combination. Essentially what it does is it looks almost exactly the same color as a Pinstripe, but it really jumbles up the pattern. And it's pretty powerful if you can actually find a gene that really jumbles up the pattern and keeps the original color of the combination. So you can actually take your favorite combination and add trick into the mix and really jumble up the pattern and keep the same intense intensity and the same color, which is really powerful when you're actually working on designer ball pythons. And I actually worked one more gene into this mix, and that is the Pastel. Take a look at this. This is the Pastel, and the Pastel works really well with the trick because the Pastel also changes the pattern, I'd say probably to a lesser degree than a lot of combinations, but you can definitely tell it really wipes out the alien heads on this one. And the Pastels really bring in a lot of yellow color when you're working it in with a lot of combos. So here's what happens if you work Pastel in with the Pinstripe trick. Take a look at this crazy snake. That is really amazing. Essentially what this is a Lemon Blast trick. So the Lemon Blast is the Pastel Pinstripe, and then you add trick to it, and it really jumbles up the pattern. Makes for a really amazing combo. As a matter of fact, it gets a little bit confusing because I've seen some people say that that the trick Pinstripe is called the Cheetah, which is kind of the common name for the trick Pinstripe. But the problem is, if you actually come over here to Morphmarket and you search for Cheetah, it actually brings up a different combination of genes that doesn't have the trick in it. So I think there's two different Cheetahs, one that has the trick and one that doesn't have the trick. And a lot of people say, yeah, this would be like a pastel cheetah. You know, a lot of people kind of get it confused with the other cheetah that is a multi-gene combination. I actually brought this one step further and I added one more version, one more copy of Pastel to the mix. Take a look at this. This is the Super Pastel Pinstripe trick, and this is a really crazy combination. I first saw this and I was like, man, that is insane. So essentially what this is a Super Blast with the trick, or you can also call it a Killer Blast with the trick, which is a Super Pastel, the trick, and the Pinstripe. So take a look at this. This is actually the Pastel GHI, and both the Pastel and the GHI are pattern enhancing genes. And the GHI is a dark morph, stands for gotta have it. And the cool thing about the GHI, this almost looks like a regular GHI. Usually the GHI kind of has the same pattern, and it usually darkens the background quite a bit. And usually with these combinations, the Pastel really brings out a lot of the bright yellow of the Pastel GHIs when you mix them together. Sometimes it can be super bright with the Pastel mixed with GHI. And here's what happens if you work trick into the Pastel GHI. Take a look at this crazy combo. This is probably one of the most stunning GHI combos that I have ever seen. With the, you know, you can definitely tell the GHI is really jumbling up the pattern and making the background really black. And then the Pastel is really enhancing a lot of the yellow, bringing it out. And then the trick is really exploding the pattern, almost scrambles it up. Makes for a really amazing combination. So here's another combination with two pattern enhancing genes. This actually has the Leopard, which is probably one of the king of combos when it comes to kind of jumbling up the pattern, even more than the GHI. And this also has Firefly in the mix, which is the Pastel and the Fire. The Pastel kind of jumbles up the pattern. And here's what happens if you work trick into the Firefly Leopard. Take a look at this snake. This is one of the most amazing combos that I've seen. The trick just takes it and really jumbles up the pattern. And it seems like in these trick combinations, it almost seems like you almost get like a brighter yellow when you're mixing it in with Pastel. It seems like every Pastel trick combination really enhances kind of the contrast and the brightness of the yellow when you're looking at some of these combos. Makes for a really amazing combination. And I actually pulled up one more with two copies of Pastel in the same combination, so you can actually see what a Superfly trick Leopard looks like. Take a look at this crazy combo. I can't say I've ever seen anything with like some of these. It's kind of amazing. You start mixing genes together and you could pretty much get like a one-of-a-kind snake out of, you know, hundreds of thousands of snakes over here on Morphmarket. You just have the right genes that mix together, and there's nothing really that looks like anything like this. This almost looks like a highway, like almost like a Pastel freeway or something like that. Really crazy pattern on this one. As a matter of fact, I was wondering what the price is on this one. This one actually sold for $500. Not bad for a Super Pastel trick Leopard. So here is a black pewter if you want to go to the dark side. The black pewter is actually, if you look at just the pewter is the cinnamon and the pastel, and the black pewter essentially substitutes the cinnamon with black pastel. So it's a black pastel, which gets a little bit confusing because the black pastel isn't really yellow like your pastel. It's kind of a confusing name, but this is the black pewter, which is really awesome. Some of these can be really silver colored, really awesome beginning to make silver colored snakes with the black pastel and the pastel. And here's what happens if you work trick into the black pewter. Take a look at this. It really explodes the pattern. It's pretty amazing, the influence of trick if you mix it with the right combinations. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of the trick combinations I've seen, if you don't mix it with a lot of the pattern enhancing genes, a lot of times you only get, you know, kind of the subtle, kind of the little curly cues and the pixelation and the patterns, and you can't see that much of an effect. But when you mix it with the right genes, you can get some really dramatic effects. So here is the Black Onyx. I actually did a video on the Onyx, kind of an interesting combination. You can actually add a lot of genes into the Onyx and make some really amazing combinations. And this can actually trick you a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Black Onyx, you look at the sides, you think it almost looks like it has trick in the mix, because you can see it has a really jumbled up pattern with some pixelation. And if you actually look at the genes on this one, this is actually just the black pastel and the het red axanthic. If you have het red, let me tell you, you probably want to shoot for something with black pastel in the mix. Makes for an amazing combination. And usually with the Black Onyx, you have this really strong stripe right down the top of the back. And look what happens when you actually mix trick in with the Black Onyx. Take a look at this. This is a really dramatic effect. As a matter of fact, I was doing the Onyx video and I decided to skip this one because it was kind of, you know, out of the realm of what we were actually doing in that video. And I kind of wanted to save it for this video to kind of show what the trick does. And I really didn't know, you know, the potential of the trick. And it's kind of interesting with a lot of these genes. You really don't know the pros and cons and all the ins and outs until you do, you know, all the combinations pretty much from front to back, the limitations and the potential of all these genes. And let me tell you, the trick is looking better and better with a lot of these combinations. So here's the last one I wanted to show you. This is a kind of an impressive transformation by adding trick into this. This is the Cyprus and the DJI. It's amazing what the Cyprus can do to the DJI. Usually the DJI is really dark and has kind of a jumbled up pattern, and the Cyprus almost turns it around and makes for a really impressive combination. And you can definitely see a lot of the dark in from the DJI along the back here. And here's what happens if you work trick in with the Cyprus DJI. Take a look at this. This is a really amazing combination. Probably one of my favorite DJI combos with the trick and the Cyprus. Pretty amazing. And the Cyprus is pretty expensive. I'm guessing this is probably pretty expensive. Yeah, it's actually sold for $900. Makes for a really impressive combination. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Jack W asks, have you ever made a ball python that is a world's first? And that is a very good question. As far as I know, I pretty much know for a fact, I don't think I've ever produced a world's first ball python. That is a ball python that has never been made before. And really, there's different strategies to breeding ball pythons. Sometimes it's basically whatever you can afford just to get into it. And I'm kind of past that stage where, you know, you kind of sell some hatchlings and you can invest in higher end projects with the money from those hatchlings, and you can kind of go in different directions. But usually when you first start out, you're pretty much buying whatever you can afford. And some people do it just for the money, producing high-end snakes to make a really high return on investment. Some people kind of look at it as producing only really beautiful snakes. They want really super bright colors. Or some people go kind of to the dark side. Some people focus on one gene. You know, you could do like all axanthics, nothing but axanthics, and produce them that way. And some people kind of lead the pack doing only world's first. They want to have brand new combinations that have never been done before. And I've seen some people do it, you know, with like some clown combos, and every year they're making brand new clown combos that we've never seen before. And I think that's one of the biggest excitements going to a reptile show, because you go up to these tables and you see a lot of snakes that have never been produced, the world's first, and a lot of times it's completely unexpected. You don't know exactly what it's going to look like until you actually produce the world's first. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.